A U.S. warship sailed through the South China Sea earlier today to challenge China's excessive maritime challenge, officials have confirmed. The USS McCampbell sailed within 12 miles of the islands of Tree, Lincoln and Woods in a so-called freedom of navigation operation. U.S. Pacific Fleet spokeswoman Rachel McMarr said the visit was intended to preserve access to the waterways as governed by international law. China has significantly upgraded its military presence in the Parcel Islands over the past few years. Recent satellite images showed jet fighters had been stationed on at least one of the islands. China controversially claims sovereignty over the entire South China Sea. However, this clashes with rival claims from Taiwan, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei and the Philippines. The U.S., a treaty ally of the Philippines, disputes the Chinese claim. Last September, another American warship, the USS Decatur, conducted a patrol close to the Spratlys Islands in the same region. During a 10-hour patrol, the ship traveled within 12 miles of two Chinese-controlled reefs. China has been fortifying and artificially expanding islands in the South China Sea to create bases for troops, combat aircraft and naval assets. The South China Sea is one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. Each year an estimate $5 trillion (£3.9 billion) of trade passes through the region. In July 2016, a United Nations arbitration tribunal ruled against Beijing in a South China Sea dispute with the Philippines. However, China, as well as Taiwan, refused to recognize the tribunal and insisted the issue should be resolved via bilateral negotiations. Trump to retreat, China to crush U.S. in South China Sea. China will crush Donald Trump's military if they dare to flex their military muscles in the South China Sea. An expert has warned in a menacing World War III warning. China has the ability to control the South China Sea and the U.S. could be forced to retreat as Beijing prepares for war. China, along with several of its neighbors including the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei and Taiwan, have been involved in a decades-long dispute over who controls the South China Sea. Xi Jinping's superstate claims most of the sea as its territory, but China's neighbors argue parts of the area belong to them. Tensions have skyrocketed in recent years and resulted in the involvement of the U.S. Brian Clark of the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments said, China has the ability to control the South China Sea because it has established escalation dominance in that area. Beijing's main priorities for 2019 include strengthening its military training and preparation for war. An editorial published on New Year's Day in the state-run military newspaper The PLA Daily said, "We should be well prepared for all directions of military struggle and comprehensively improve troops' combat response in emergencies to ensure we can meet the challenge and win when there is a situation." Mr. Clark went on to add, China now has the world's largest navy, which has more than 300 ships. If you want to be able to conduct sea control in a region, having a big navy is a valuable part of that. China is able to focus the attention of that navy on near seas to an extent that its competitors like the U.S. cannot. We've got a global responsibility, a global navy. Whereas China's got the luxury of focusing more of its attention on the near seas, including the South China Sea, China is continuing to flex its military muscles in Asia, strengthening its claims over the disputed South China Sea. U.S. warships are deployed in the region and are tasked with monitoring Chinese expansion. Mr. Clark, who was formerly a special assistant to the Chief of Naval Operations and director of his Commander's Action Group, continued to say, China has got the world's largest Coast Guard. It has more than 1,000 ships, and a couple hundred of those are able to operate throughout the South China Sea, and only about a dozen of those are able to actually deploy out overseas. Thousands of ships have been brought into service to support the Chinese operations in the East and South China Seas. They routinely harass and interfere with ships of the United States Navy and other navies. It gives the Chinese a capability that is not really mirrored on the other side by the US. He added, "There are multiple islands in the South China Sea that are now built up, armed and able to support air operations, giving the Chinese the ability to control, surveil, monitor and conduct air defense in parts of the South China Sea persistently without having to deploy ships there." The Chinese could have a terrestrial-based surveillance and air defense network over the South China Sea. The ability to control the air is a key part of controlling the seas. Mr. Clark's remarks come after Trump claimed big progress is being made in U.S.-China relations. In a December 29 tweet, the Republican firebrand said a deal aimed at redressing trade imbalance between the rival nations is moving along very well. Mr. Trump said he had spoken to his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, in a long and very good telephone call. Chinese state media have downplayed the significance of the call, however.